Okay, let's get started. Welcome to today's webinar on HIPAA Security Rule compliance. This is part 2 of an 8-part series, and today we will be discussing administrative safeguards. Now, if you missed part 1 of the webinar series, please stick around. Today's information will be valuable for you. After, send me a quick note and I'll get you access to the recording of part 1 and get you up to speed. Or if you already attended part 1 and you want to have that recording on demand, just let me know. I'll be happy to get you access to it. Another quick housekeeping item, please ask questions today if you're joining us live, all right? To ask a question, click the Q&A feature on your screen, type your first name, type your question, click submit. If you're on a mobile device, just tap your screen and you'll see the Q&A prompt. Now, if you have any issues with the webinar Q&A feature, my contact information is located at the bottom of the last slide. Feel free to send in your questions that way as well, and I'll make sure to get to you personally. Keep in mind, we have a big group today, so if time runs out and I haven't answered your question, I'll promptly follow up with you after. So let's dive right in. Good afternoon. My name is Mark Cirqua. I am VCIO for Proactive IT. I've been in this business a little over 10 years now, navigating a range of technology channels. I'm focusing in cybersecurity at the moment. I've brought the team with me here. We have Noel Sutherland. Noel is our Director of IT. He's also VCIO for Proactive IT. He's been in the business over 17 years, saving the best for last. Keith Foda, company visionary. Keith's been in the business over 25 years. And Keith sits on the CompTIA Advisory Committee. And if you didn't know already, CompTIA is the voice of the world's IT industry, and they set top-level standards for IT best practices across the globe. So enough about us. Let's talk about the HIPAA Security Rule and dig into how we accomplish compliance regarding administrative safeguards. Now, the first thing I want to do today is really demystify the HIPAA Security Rule. The concept is very simple, very easy to understand. Okay, if you're new to this, you're in luck, because after today, you're going to have a roadmap on how to get started with a plan to achieve HIPAA Security Rule compliance. Okay, we're going to give you a strategy and help you break this down into easy to understand pieces. Okay, the second step in your 6-step plan is addressing security standards. That begins with administrative safeguards. Now, one must implement reasonable and appropriate administrative safeguards that will establish the foundation for a covered entity or a business associate's security program. Now, administrative safeguards, you can read the definition here for yourself, but basically, these are administrative actions you can take to ensure that the security measures you've put in place are managed properly, and also how your staff is managed and trained to protect electronic patient records. And there are 9 subsections of administrative safeguards. The first subsection carries the most weight, and this states that covered entities and their business associates need to have a security management process in which to implement policies and procedures that will detect, contain, and correct security violations. Now, I would predict that 100% of organizations have already experienced or will experience a security violation, but the important question to ask yourself is, do we have a security management process in place to detect the violation, to contain the violation, and to correct the violation? That's what's important. So in part one of the webinar series, we talked about required and addressable standards. The security management process is in fact a required standard. You have to do it to comply. And you can see the handy dandy action required posted on each item that is required here on the slide deck. So let's break it down into pieces. And listen, we have 13 administrative set standards. So I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on each one. I'm going to list the definitions and briefly summarize each point for you. Okay, so risk analysis. You can look at risk analysis like this. You must identify potential areas of risk throughout your electronic work environment. And then you need to look at the probability of something bad happening there. So you want to ask yourself, where are we exposed? What are the chances something's going to go wrong? Now I'll give you a hint. Email. Email is a big area of exposure right now with ransomware and other types of cryptoware. So that would be a good example of a vulnerable area with a high risk, okay? And email is just one example. There are many others. Risk management, okay? This is the process of making decisions on how to address those security risks, right? You need to implement those security measures in order to reduce risks. Some sample questions you want to ask yourself during risk management is, what securities measures do we already have in place? Ask yourself, do we need to engage other resources to assist us in risk management? Is executive leadership, for example, or management involved in the risk management and mitigation decisions? They should be, okay? And are these security processes really being communicated throughout the organization, okay? Risk management, very important. Sanction policies. Sanction policies is pretty easy to understand. This is saying or asking, how are you going to discipline your employees who don't comply with the policies and procedures you've put in place for the company? So ask yourself, do we have a sanction policy? Ask yourself, are employees required to sign a statement of adherence to that policy? Okay, make sure you provide examples to employees of what potential violations look like and also of the policies and procedures. Okay, information system activity reviews. This one sounds a little more complicated. It is, all right? You have to have a system in place to regularly review records of information system activity. For example, audit logs, access reports, security incident tracking reports. Questions to ask yourself here, what logs or reports are generated by our information system, okay? Is there a procedure that describes how to go about a specific type of review? All right. Now, the assigned security responsibility is a very important standard. It's very simple. It'll make you ask the question, who will be operationally responsible for assuring that the covered entity complies with the security rule? And this does require that one single individual be designated as having overall responsibility. Now, I would make the suggestion here that you should probably form a committee and delegate specific responsibilities out to staff, because that's a big weight to carry. So hand some of the load off to a capable staff or a third party, right? But ultimately, one individual is going to be responsible for that standard, right? Okay, if you have questions, please ask. Workforce security. Now, within this item, there are addressable standards, which means they're not required, but it also doesn't mean that they're optional, okay? This means that one must evaluate and assess, document why you would not implement the standard, okay? Workforce security, it's broken down into 3 parts: authorization, workforce clearance, and termination procedures. So asking who has authority to determine who can access e-PHI, electronic protected health information, okay? Ask yourself, do appropriate staff have access to necessary information? And do our termination policies assign responsibility for removing information and or physical access, right? Okay, which brings us right into information access management. Now, this one is a hybrid, so there's 3 parts to it. One part has a required standard. The other parts are addressable standards. The required section deals with if you're a healthcare clearinghouse and part of a larger organization, you must implement standards that protect e-PHI from the larger organization. So if this is your situation, ask yourself, do we have policies, do we have procedures in place to protect e-PHI from the other functions of the larger organization, okay? Going into security awareness training. This one is an addressable standard. Again, addressable does not mean optional, but you want to assess if it's reasonable to have security training sessions with staff, set security reminders, protect from malicious software, login monitoring, password management. I personally fail to see why any of those things wouldn't be reasonable to implement for small or for large organizations. I would say it's probably easier for a smaller organization than with a larger organization. But the fact of the matter is, it's an addressable standard. So if you can't find a reasonable case not to implement it, then you need to do that. And you need to document that decision. Okay, we're on the home stretch here, and it's going to get really easy from here. Now, when I say easy, I'm talking about the concepts are very easy to understand, okay? The problem is in the execution of these concepts, and that can be very difficult. Not because it's rocket science, but simply due to the fact that typically organizations lack the necessary resources to dedicate to these kinds of initiatives, right? Now, security incident procedures, very easy to understand, right? You need to implement policies and procedures to address security incidents. It's really cut and dry. The question is, what is that going to look like? How do you make sure everyone follows the plan? Okay? Speaking of plans, contingency planning, right? Have a backup plan, and you can see that you have an action required sticky note here. It means this is a required standard. So within your contingency plan, you're going to have a data backup plan, right? You want to have exact copies of electronic protected health information, okay? In addition to a data backup plan, you're going to have a disaster recovery plan. Now, this says that you need to establish procedures to restore any loss of data, right? So it's backing up the data, then having a process in place to restore that data. And I would suggest that that system be automated, okay? And there's a lot of different ways that you can do that, okay? Evaluation, very important. And I would say evaluation should be done quarterly, all right? Maybe even more than quarterly if you're just starting out your plan, okay? Maybe once a month. You need to determine if your strategy is up to date with operations. And look, very difficult for one to evaluate oneself from the inside, right? Best practices, at least use a party from another department within the organization, right? Now, industry standards really say to use a third party for your evaluation, all right? It's not always something every organization can do, but if you can have a qualified third party evaluate your plan, that's the best case scenario. As I just mentioned, if you can't do that, have another department that's independent from other departments when you're within your organization evaluate what you're doing, okay? And business associate contracts. The last item today, this is a very slippery slope, and with the HITECH Act and the Omnibus Rule, the Department of Health and Human Services has really cracked down, okay? It's the last administrative safeguard, and you know, word to the wise here, a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. So I suggest going in, examining all of those business associate contracts and begin the process of determining if your business associates are in fact compliant with the agreement you have with them. Okay? You do have business associate agreements with all of your vendors who can access e-PHI, don't you? Let's hope so. Okay, that's all I have for today. I'm going to follow up with a slide deck for everyone who attended today's webinar. Again, let me know. I can share the recording for all of those of you who need access on demand. Please RSVP and tune in next week, where we will be covering part 3 of the series, and we will discuss physical safeguards. Have a great day, everyone.